Hi friends. I had a nice slow morning here in my tiny hotel room. And it's kind of nice to have a day when I'm not running off immediately to some engagement, rehearsal, whatever. So I had a little time to do my morning routine and meditate, and it was really interesting. It was one of those days where I felt a bit of friction getting into it. I had just absorbed some things over the last few days that partly my post yesterday, recognizing that there are these moments when we have to defend our path, we have to defend our alignment with what we are truly wanting to align with. Because as we all know, it doesn't happen automatically. Choice is a choice precisely because there's a choice. That's a very circular sounding sentence. But it's the case that if we kind of tap into, okay, this is where my heart is, this is where I'm headed, there's a real choice there, and then there can be moments or periods of defending that. And I think some of that has been just kind of brewing in me, and I'm recognizing some of the ways in which that's true for me in my life and whatnot. And but something showed up today, which actually might be related, but it's not wasn't a direct tie-in when it hit me. But what I was thinking about is the nature of focus. And focus is something that I reflect on a bit, and I talk quite a bit about when I'm teaching piano students. Because in music, and in piano in particular, there's some ways that our focus has to be utilized, and they amount to ways of training our focus. Our focus actually develops significantly in some very significant ways through the practice of piano, and of course through the practice of any kind of yoga or qigong or physical discipline, any kind of meditation. These are all practices that are forming, molding, and honing our capacity to focus. And I started having a conversation in my head with my younger self as I was meditating today, and recognizing that, because I've had a couple people stress the importance of focus to me over the years. I remember a piano teacher from my when I was in school in Chicago talked about focus, and he kind of said, "Well, you don't really have focus right now." and I was sort of like prickly about that. I was like, "What do you mean? I can focus. I know how to focus." But he was right, and in sort of like reflecting on where I was at the time and seeing what some of my issues were around focus, one of the things that showed up in this very helpful conversation that I was having with me 20 years ago was this idea that because focus is a narrowing of our attention. That's not always strictly true, but it's a directing of our attention. We have to be able to direct our attention like a beam of light onto something with precision. If we're talking about navigating a passage in piano, that's where our focus needs to be. Now, there may be an emotional component of that. It may be multi-layered, but we can't be thinking about what we're going to have for lunch. That if our attention is on what am I going to have for lunch, our focus is not on the thing, and it scatters it kind of sounds so obvious when you say it, but focus is eliminating, part of having focus is eliminating things from our immediate sphere of view. We're going to not look at everything else and just look at this. And that idea I found somehow threatening when I was younger. I think I recognize in myself a certain resistance to that, because it was like I have always been somebody who had so many interests in so many areas of life that fascinated me that I didn't want to eliminate any of them. And there are people like Buckminster Fuller who very specifically say, one of the things that's contributing to the decay of our culture is the fact that everybody's a specialist. Buckminster Fuller was a big advocate for universalists, in other words, people who understand a lot of domains of life. Broad, expansive thinkers across domains, not just limited to one area of speciality. And I've always resonated with that. It's always attracted me. It's always been how I wanted to develop myself. So the idea of that narrowing, whether it was for the period of time of playing one piano piece, or whether it was for the period of time of a week or two to take on a certain project, there came a point at which that idea of narrowing, that idea of eliminating things and strictly, narrowing down, somehow became threatening to me, and I actually really resisted focus. And what I would tell myself now, this is the conversation I was having in my head again this morning. What I've realized about this is that type of focus, if it's focused on something that we are passionate about, and it's something that we actually desire to master or align with, then focus actually is an embrace. It feels like it's cutting things away, but even for a universalist like Buckminster Fuller, he had to pick which domains of life were his. As far as I know, he wasn't an Olympic pole vault champion. He had to, there were still areas of what he would consider universalist, within his universalist worldview or his universalist perspective. He still picked certain domains to really make his mark and to really to be the areas of inquiry for his mind to spend its life exploring. And what hit me the phrase or the way I saw it this morning was, even for a universalist, even for someone who really wants to live in a lot of different domains of life and operate across a lot of areas of life. Focus on one thing is actually training ourselves to embrace all things, because we don't want universalism. We don't want universalism with mediocrity. We still want depth and excellence and mastery, and we still want all of the aspects of those domains that make them inspiring to us to be available to us. And the only way that happens is through focus. The only way that happens is through spending the time it takes and using our energy and our attention in the ways that are required to really embrace those parts, those things, to really get into them. And so it was just this thing, again, the conversation in my head with myself was like letting myself know, even if focus right now means eliminating all these things that feel really important, in the long run, you can trust that this focus, that this precisely the process of eliminating them from your field of view right now is actually giving yourself the capacity to embrace them. Because without this ability, which is really ultimately it's an exercise of consciousness. It's how we use our mind, how we use our attention. Without that, none of these things are going to be truly available. They're always going to be just enticements. They're not going to be actual things we have the capacity to deeply embrace. And you look at like a Buckminster Fuller, I mean, he embraced vast territories of human understanding, just massive. He was a genuine universalist in his intellectual and spiritual, and just his whole, everything he created is just it's a massive worldview. And there's a lot of drilling down into one tiny small detail of how this works, of how something works, of the structure of a molecule, you know. So that was just a little encouraging pep talk that I was able to give my, you know, early 20s self this morning. And it's of course also relevant to me right now. I think it might have even come out of reflecting on, you know, what am I spending my attention on over the next couple of days as I go into the studio, which is just, I mean, you want to talk about focus, that's like one of the most hyper-focused environments you can walk into. And I'm preparing for that, both very concretely and also emotionally, spiritually, just getting myself ready to go into that environment and be comfortable there, because I know what's coming. So that's where I am today, people. Thanks for watching. Appreciate you. Love you. Have a wonderful day. I'll see you tomorrow.